As you, this meeting is being recorded. um, as you all know, this is an area that people struggle with a lot because it's very hard to get one's name out there. So over the next hour, Alex will take us through some of the strategies that he's learned, some of the approaches that he has taken with LearnCube and before that. And will be leading us through our first masterclass of this festival. So really, without further ado, I would like to hand over to Alex, who will be leading this session. And of course, you can also find Alex as the chair of our International Tutoring Roundtable this Friday from 2 till 4 p.m., which will be bringing together 9 of our finest tutoring friends from around the world. So don't forget that. That's Friday, the 2nd of July at 2 p.m. But today is the Marketing Masterclass with Alex Asser. So Alex, please, I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Ludo. So just before we kind of get started, if you can you just pop into the chat, if you're a private tutor or if you run an organization, because I think the way that you may approach marketing is fairly similar, but I kind of want to talk to the audience today. So if you can just help me out with that, that would be fantastic. And ideally, if there's something about marketing in particular that you want us to cover, that would be really helpful. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to get my presentation up.
I believe what you've created is what they call a chat waterfall.
That's right. Honestly, I think it'll give us a great insight into, and also to be able to angle this session, which I really hope this is going to be as practical as possible. So while we get that cracking, I'm just going to share my screen. Everyone can see that and present. Great. So look, my name is Alex Asher. I'm the CEO of LearnCube. And one of the reasons that it's a helpful kind of background is that we provide a virtual classroom and an online school solution for language teachers and particularly for tutoring companies. And why I say that's helpful is that we help a lot of different tutoring companies. So we have a lot of exposure to what independent tutors are doing, what medium-sized tutoring companies are doing, and even what the very largest tutoring companies are doing. And one part of pretty much what they all struggle with is marketing positioning, and trying to, this is a competitive market. How do they not just get their name out there, but how do they really stand out and succeed? So that's what today is really about. I did also want to mention one of the reasons that a lot of this information has sort of been gathered is, we run both a monthly webinar and a weekly podcast. It's totally free, and it's all about contributing and giving back to tutors who, again, are looking for ideas, motivation, and inspiration around marketing. So that's my background, and that's what you're going to hear from today. And so the biggest challenge for most tutoring companies is typically around this. Competition, everyone feels this quite innately. We're not only tutoring in our physical location now. Online tutoring as well has made tutoring far more accessible, which is really exciting, but it also has the challenge of a lot of people feeling like they're now competing with the world. And so there's really 2 different ways you can look at that as well. Like on one side, you can tutor the world. On the other side, everyone from the world can be possibly in what you thought was your little private area. So competition is a major pain point for people when it comes to marketing. The second thing is maybe not a problem for the tutoring company as such. They might not realize it, but they're very same. If you look on most tutoring company websites, they look remarkably similar. And actually, the more generic they are, the more similar they look even more so. It's basically, we offer a range of different subjects. We offer it in a range of different locations. We have a range of tutors, but none of those things really speaks out to why somebody would actually choose you. And I think that's the thing that I'm going to be talking about today. And then, of course, there's that price aspect as well. And I think that's kind of an aspect when people aren't differentiating between themselves, then price becomes the lowest common denominator and becomes the it does seem to be the area that people are competing on when they don't know what else to compete on. And that's not really what we want for, well, for anyone in this, in this market. So I've picked 3 things that I think are really good takeaway points that will help you, overcome these major barriers when it comes to marketing. So the first one being to pick a niche and to be very, very purposeful and deliberate with that. In fact, that's probably the #1 thing that you can do to improve your business, is to pick a niche, or at least one niche at a time. And I will be having a little look at the end. Hopefully we're going to leave some time over for a bit of Q&A, and I'm going to try and pick up some of these questions. But depending on your size, picking your niche is going to be either totally critical or very important. But either way, it's going to be something that we're going to be talking about today. The second thing to stop being the same as everybody is to stand out. And so we're going to be talking about some strategies on how you can stand out. And then finally, we're going to talk about service as well. And I think service and experience is what I want to talk about. Why? Because it helps us stop talking about price, which again, doesn't really lead to any real winners. So with that in mind, I'm going to start with the first idea, which is to pick your niche. Now, again, at the potential risk of a waterfall of chat, as Ludo says, if you want to tell me your niche, then let me know. I think it'd be really fascinating, even so that other people can see, hey, there are different ways that I can convey my message, what my tutoring business is. But let's start off with, how do you pick a niche, and how does this then follow through to the other aspects that I'm going to be talking about? So picking your niche is like the fundamental, the foundation block. And from that, you'll be able to then find that audience. And so if you do that first job really well, finding your audience will actually be much, much easier for you. And I think you're going to find that really, really helps you with your marketing. Once you've actually found your market, then you need to stand out from everybody else. And we're going to be looking at how you can do that. And then finally, adding value is the thing that not only keeps the people that you already have, but it also will bring that retention, and really create a service that is referral worthy. So with that in mind, let's start with how to choose your niche. So when you're looking at a niche, I think the first thing that people look to is your geography. And geography is really important, but it's only one aspect. So I think it's natural to look at the country, but really looking at your city, and also some of the demographic and cultural aspects that may even kind of help you figure out which geographies do you actually have an advantage in, and which ones do you choose. So start, I think, with that. That's really, really easy. But the other way that you can start looking for your niche is, where's your advantage in your expertise? Is there something about your story, your skill set, your background, your experience? Is there like an overlap that can really bring something like a really unique combination? I think this is really helpful for particularly like small tutoring companies and even just independent tutors. Why? Because you don't need to tutor the world. You just need enough students to make your business really thrive. So definitely have a little think about that now, in terms of what's the expertise that you have that's quite unique, and that people aren't already in. One of the other areas you can look for is if you have a cultural, demographic, or language advantage. So a lot of people really look for other people that reflect their values. They don't have to look and think like them, but they want those people that they hire to do the tutoring to reflect their values. So this is a really good one in terms of, particularly, you might have maybe a language advantage. Maybe it's you speak, obviously you might speak fluent English, but you might have a background that might really resonate with a certain demographic of people, or people that just speak that language. It could be foreigners that come into the UK, but maybe they are from countries that speak Arabic. in which case there's a natural niche there for you to identify and for you to have a real win in, and it's something that really sets you apart from the rest. So I've given a couple of examples here, but one is, even just helping international families, and then again being very careful to make sure that this niche is not too big. But it might be with young children, so really looking at the age of those students. Where are they living geographically? Perhaps in Scotland, and what's their unique scenario, their unique pain point. So the other thing that you can look for is, if you want to widen your geography, is I would actually really encourage you to reduce or narrow your specialization, and vice versa. So if you're going to be very specialist, I think it's worthwhile having a wider geography. Otherwise, you might not find enough people and enough customers. So these are hopefully some common sense and actually really helpful questions for you to ask. What do you have as an advantage from a geographic point of view, from an expertise point of view, and from a cultural, language, demographic point of view? So next, once you have that down, finding your niche is actually not that hard, because geographically you can look within a small area, and anything that sits outside of that area is not something that you need to pursue. It also means that you can be quite clear on, if you know where those people live, what kinds of accommodation do they live in? What is, how do they move around? Because that can all give you insights into where to look to both promote your service and for people to be able to find more about you. So that's my, I think that key idea that I want to get across is, how can they really stumble across you? And by knowing your audience, you can find ways of them being able to do that multiple times. Because funnily enough, people need to hear from you multiple times in order to really move ahead with even the smallest action, which could be to visit your website, or it could be to even get in touch with you and maybe even have a call. So this is kind of hopefully gives you some ideas on where to find your niche. What are their interests, and how can they bump onto you, maybe even online? So where are they hanging out? And languages, I think, again, are a big opportunity for a lot of people. Because they're much easier to target on platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. And secondly, you could even do that with the ads that you create, even using Google Ads. So if you're advertising in their native language, that can give you a big advantage as well. So it's not just for, by the way, a lot of my background is in probably more so in language education, but I think the same applies with tutoring. You have the same number, you actually have just more people, but that language advantage, I think, is a great one. So once you know your niche and you start thinking about finding or looking for where that niche might be, you can use things like, as I say, targeting with Facebook ads. You can target by geography, you can target by languages spoken, you can look for groups, and you can really create a lot of opportunities for people to stumble across you by knowing those answers. But also, if you're doing in-person tutoring, if you know the geography, where they live, and everything you can about your ideal customer, which are often parents, then you can also use things like direct mail. You can do flyers in the right places. You can do posters in the right places. You can have partners in the right community environments. You can run in-person events in the right places. So all of this comes from knowing your niche, which is why it's so important. And again, for anyone that's an independent tutor, and I know that there are a number that are listening today, you don't need to tutor the world. You just need enough tutors for enough students for you to feel like you can maybe live that purpose that you're wanting, which might be 20 students, but it also may be that you're wanting to create your own agency. But either way, it still comes through these different sections. So next, we're going to look at how to stand out. So we've talked a lot about the fundamentals, but now we really want to talk about how to stand out. And one of the first ways that you can do that is being really deliberate and explicit about your story. Before this conversation, I was really sort of amazed. Like I went through dozens of different tutoring websites, and actually I saw, again, it was that problem, which is same. Everybody had a very similar story on their front website. There was nothing about their story that really grabbed anyone that was new to the website. And I picked out a couple that at least looked like they were thinking about what that story was and how they convey that, because that's a really meaningful way that you can create basically proximity between the person visiting and yourselves, because a lot of people are just window shopping. So having a really grabbing story is, I think, really important, and it'll stop you looking like wallpaper. You need to really stand out by starting with your story. So a couple of these, one was, I just thought this was at least unique, and sometimes being unique is even better than being great, because it makes people stop and pause before they kind of gloss over. So one was Jakari, and it was really talking about, you can see that they're really utilizing a lot of, they're really focusing potentially on a different demographic. It's not, and if I can say, it's not lots of stock images with white smiley faces. We've got, this is obviously a company that really values diversity and is speaking to those values. I gave another example just here where they make the story really easy to find, because if people can't differentiate, then they'll just go for where the best price is. So making your story really easy to find is really helpful. And I gave an example here just in terms of making that really clear up in front where people can read about that story. And one of the things that, and we were hearing from Johnny a little bit earlier, one of the things I really liked about Johnny is that he really embodies his agency. And I think we can all learn from that. One of the reasons that I think a lot of tutoring companies get lost is they focus on basically just creating generic imagery, generic stories. There's really nothing for somebody to go, oh, that's why I should join this company. But when you add real photos of real people that are really devoted to a particular agency, I think that already you can kind of, people really stop and take note, because it's authentic. And it's the same thing that is going to come through all of your ads. And so when I'm talking about standing out, it's not just going to be through your website, but these same ideas are going to be coming through your advertising. If you're using Facebook ads, you're going to be really wanting to convey your story. You're going to be really wanting to use authentic imagery. Why authentic? Why not, stock images, which may look better with better lighting and everything looks perfect, because it doesn't look real. And so people just discount it as like, oh, that's probably just marketing fluff. But when they see really authentic images, authentic stories, authentic testimonials, then people really stop and take notice and go, okay. It's kind of like getting behind the scenes, which I think a lot of people are really wanting to get out of their company. The next thing I'd like to talk about is your student experience. So when I again, looking through a lot of the websites before this talk, it was remarkable how same everyone looked. So even if you are offering any sort of online tuition, for example, make sure it's dynamic. Make sure it's not like a perfect picture where people are just monotonously smiling. How can you create some energy in it? How can you show the kind of tutoring that you provide? And that might be, it might be busy, but it might not be. But either way, it needs to be colorful and grabbing and really convey a whole story. I'm going to probably talk a little bit more in depth about some techniques at the end of this session, but I do want to get across this idea that you need to be very deliberate about your student experience in order to stand out. Because if it's online and it's just a Zoom call, I really think you're going to be lacking, and then people will start price shopping, because if I can get a Zoom tutoring session with one, I can get it with another, and I may as well go with the lowest price. So that's why your story resonating with your values is really important. Why the way that you present your experience is so important. And I'm going to also challenge you to hopefully thinking over some of the ways that you can add more personalization into your student experience and into your tutoring experience. So one of the ways that I like to think about this is the kind of the pre-session or the experience with your company, the during part of that experience, and then and after that. And this could be, for example, with the session itself. So every session probably has the same thing. You can offer a delight factor before somebody enters the class or the session with you. You can offer delight value in the session, and you can offer delight value after the session. Likewise, if you expand that out, you can offer delight value before somebody even chooses your company or agency or yourself. You can offer something wow and exciting inside that, maybe it's your website or anything that kind of helps that person make a good buying decision. And then once they've purchased either one session with you or even a bundle of sessions with you, you can really add a lot into that experience. And we can kind of talk about some ways that you can add that personalized effect. But I think that's the place I would start, is around that personalization and that service. Those are areas that you can always easily outcompete the big companies. Why? Because big companies love streamlining everything. So that means taking all of the personal aspects out of the equation, whereas smaller companies have the advantage and desire to really create personal relationships with their students and with the parents that might be the customer in this case. So those are just some, again, some high-level ideas on this, and we're going to go through this in a bit more detail shortly. One of the other ways that you can stand out is just in your positioning and pricing. And I brought this up because I think there's a lot of misalignment with these two ideas. So sometimes we see really high prices, but everything in the packaging suggests that it's a low value item. Thinking about value and how unique something is, that can really give you an idea of where you might want to be positioning and how you might separate yourself out. So if you're a tutor and you are wanting to charge a really high price, you're going to have to show extra value. And I really like this quote. I thought it was really helpful when it comes to pricing, because I think a lot of people get unnerved by it. They feel it's quite scary. Like, how do I price? I'm seeing these really low prices here. Do I need to compete at that same level? Do I need to price myself at that same point? And I like this quote, which is, pricing is actually really simple. Customers won't pay literally a penny more than the true value of the product, and particularly that perceived true value of the product. And in your case, it's going to be tutoring. What is the product? It is that tutoring. And I think in tutoring, you're selling not just the outcome. I think that's a really big part of what you sell, but also how you deliver that outcome of maybe better academic achievement or confidence, or what that is. But how you deliver that, I think, can be really powerful as well. But they both need to align. What you're delivering needs to be high value if you want to charge a high price, and the way that you deliver that needs to be high value in order to basically justify that high price as well. So have a little think about those two ideas. Finally, we're going to talk about what is your sweet spot? Because again, I think one of the things I really enjoyed about preparing for this session was, in looking at a bunch of different tutoring companies, there was a lot of misalignment. So the market that was chosen was really vague. It was either far too big, that they couldn't really differentiate themselves or show that they had any strong specialization, or it was small, but they didn't really talk about the exact pain points of that small market. And I think that's almost a wasted opportunity. If you choose a niche, you really need to talk to the pain points of that niche and that customer is experiencing. So the other aspect here is not just after you've chosen the market, but how can you make sure that the business side and the operation side is really smooth, is really streamlined. It not only helps you in terms of differentiating yourself, in terms of making that a really easy to buy, but it kind of conveys again the values that your tutoring company or offer might have. Like, do you make it really hard for people to buy, or do you make it really easy for people to buy? And it might not be to buy, it might be to try. So do you make it really hard for people to try your service, or do you make it really easy? And I think you definitely want to make it really easy for somebody to test your product. So that might be with a video. It might be with, it doesn't have to be with your actual demo class or your actual time, but have a look at ways that you can really convey, hey, if you work with me, this is the kind of service that you're gonna achieve. So that business and operations part really also sort of sits alongside that marketing. It's all about that experience. And I think it becomes even more important when you have a larger operation. So if you're an independent tutor, like, these things are fairly straightforward. You can improve each one of these quite easily. But when you're an organization in particular, that business side is going to be really important, because you're going to need to have, you know, you're not just looking to get one new student a week. You might be needing to get 20, 100 more students every single week. So your business and the way that you operate is going to need to be really, really slick. The product that you offer needs to align with the market and needs to align with the business. So in terms of what you're offering in terms of the tutoring, is that what your market wants? So think about, for example, it might be the packages that you offer. So if you're maybe you're going for a really high-priced tutoring offer, that could work really well, but and so your price is really high. But if you're trying to sell, I don't know, maybe an entire semester worth of courses and it's all paid up front, it still might be too expensive. So you really got to think about, hey, what is my customer, which could be the parent, how do they want to buy? What's the kind of product that they want to buy, and how do they want that delivered? So these are just some high-level questions that I think are really important for people to figure out, because once you've got this, the marketing side comes really easy. And that's what I'm going to talk about now in a bit more detail. Now I'm just going to remove this a little bit. I just want to see if we've got any major questions, and I'll come back to that. But let's talk on the marketing side of things. On marketing, I think this is a massive topic in itself, and hopefully what you've got out of this conversation today is that once you've figured out your niche, it's actually much easier to find where that niche lives, where they hang out. And then that means it really does help you understand your marketing. But I did want to provide some really practical tips before looking at questions around marketing. And I think the next part of the session is going to be a little bit more looking at your questions and trying to provide answers. So on that marketing side, I did want to talk about ads in particular, because it's an area that I think a lot of people struggle with. And again, while I've talked really high level on a lot of these topics, I did want to provide something that was very practical. And I think often this can apply also to your website. So let's look through them. So the first thing is to use a hook. So if you know your target market, then what kind of fish you're going for, then you should also work backwards to what's really going to attract them. And I think a good way of looking at a hook is write all of the things that they're looking for, and then either turn them into questions in terms of what are some of the pain points that those people have, turn them into questions, or you can be more creative with it, but I think that's a good place to start. Also remembering that it's all got to be about them. So I think one of the traps that, well, I've seen it again and again with the tutoring websites that I've been viewing, is it's all about the tutoring company. It's like, our tutors are the best. this is our service and this is how we're better than everybody else. But they don't spend really enough time digging in to what are the pain points that their ideal customer has. So really think about all of your ads and all of your website being focused purely on the niche that you're trying to go after. When you're doing ads, and also again, in your website, actually in everything, try to use short, simple words. Why? Because people don't have a lot of time to get your message. So in an ad, they have very little time to read. In a website, they give you very little attention. Most websites, people are bouncing straight out. So you need to have really catchy wording. And as I say, you need to have that hook that gets them on the line. And basically, once you've done that well, they're giving you not a lot more time. They're just giving you enough to be able to get to the next hook, the next thing that's going to keep them on your website or on your ad in that case. The other thing that I want you to think about is having one call to action. In an ad, that's totally important because there's not much more you can put in an ad. It's a very limited amount of text, whether that's a Google ad or a Facebook ad. Both of those, there's very little limited opportunity for you to talk about more than one thing, and people just get confused and do nothing. We really want people to go away with an action. So that really applies with ads, but as I say, I feel like all of these are just as valuable to think about with your website. And remembering that your website is the window it's your store window. That's what people are viewing. That's the reality that you're presenting. So you also want to have one specific call to action on your own website. A number of websites I see, they have lots of different calls to action and the hope that somebody might nibble a bit on this and nibble on a bit on that, or if it doesn't work this one, maybe this other one will work. And actually what happens is people get confused and they leave. So having a specific and single call to action is really important. In an ad and likewise in your website, creating emotion is really important. And that come from the hook. So if you know what your target market is, those pain points are, really make sure that you're creating emotion with it. So the wording that you create should be generating some kind of emotion. Why? Because people move when they're moved. So if you just have something generic and static, let's call it that, there's no motion, then it's really easy for people to pass on by or go somewhere else because there's nothing grabbing them. Like, again, people are really, if you think about it, people are really attracted by activity. So if something's super static, meaning it's very dull, boring, vanilla, generic, then people will move on. Whereas if you create something that really demands attention, then people are much more likely to stay. And there are two different ways that you can use emotion or convey emotion. One is in the way that you write. Emojis is, I think, a possibility, but really also in the visuals. The visuals convey much, much more than your words will. So when you're thinking about the images that you use, particularly for your ads, make sure they're real photos, but make sure that they're generating and showing the emotion that you want your viewer, your customer, your prospect to feel. So that means it's got to be super positive, not just like generic smiling faces, but something that ideally feels genuine, like they're actually in the middle of something and you've just snapped like something genuine and real time. I think that's going to be much more attractive to somebody looking at your service compared to, as I say, no-goes are going to be stock photos. Why? Because they do exactly the opposite of all of these things. They don't create any emotion because there's no story. People can see through a stock photo because there's no story behind that. Whereas any real photo has a whole story, like the way that people are dressing, the kinds of people that are in those photos, those all convey a whole story and a whole experience. So here are some examples, as I say, real students and tutors, happy smiley faces, but as I say, try and make those as genuine and ideally sort of make it feel like they're not just looking at the camera. See if you can kind of capture a moment in time that feels really like they're part of a tutoring session. You can do outside photos, can convey kind of a little bit more than sometimes in a sort of plain wall. So that could be one thing to think about. Avoid large groups as well. Even if you are selling group tutoring, make sure that those groups don't look too large. Otherwise, people again convey like a low value. Avoid putting too much text over your imagery. Why? Because it dilutes the thing that you're trying to convey. And avoid putting a logo on the images as well in your ads. Why? Because it detracts from somebody really taking note of the image, particularly with Facebook ads, because you've got to think about how somebody is viewing that ad. They're in the middle of some really entertaining stuff, hopefully, on their Facebook page. So if they see an image with a logo, they're like, ad, get rid of it. So that could be, you really want somebody to stop and then read rather than be interrupted by your logo. So those are hopefully some practical tips. I'm going to move to a different view so I can actually see more of your chats and questions. But if you do have anything that you'd like me to answer, please pop it through. I'd really love to make this as as two-way as possible. And I think a lot of questions can really help. So pop that away into the chat. But in the meantime, let me just have a look at some of the questions. So one that I get a lot is on when I'm talking about creating real, using real photos, and people asking about GDPR, safeguarding, and those things. Really common question and makes total sense. So you do need to ask for permission. But I think what a lot of people fear is that people will just immediately say no. I think you'd be amazed at how often people will say yes, but they just need to be asked. So, and likewise, this is part of you delivering a great service. Like when you deliver a great service and you build a really strong connection with your students and their parents potentially, people say yes to a lot more. So I think you'll be surprised at how easy it is actually to do. And you can use those in advertise and in ads, but be aware that you need that permission. One of the other things you can do is it's often easy as well in terms of reciprocity, right? Like you can also ask, first of all, you want to ask when the time's right. So when they've had a fantastic session with you, when you're really in their good books, that's the moment to ask. Don't wait until, it's in the middle of the week, they're totally busy and you're asking them to do something extra. That makes it really hard to do. So try and orchestrate moments where they're really positive about you and then ask, and then you'll be surprised how often they'll say yes. I'm just going to go back to some of the other questions we've got here.
I think there was a question there about advice on whether tutors should, whether it's worthwhile engaging a professional photographer or videographer. What are your thoughts on that area?
It's really interesting. I would start without. I would really start without. Why? Because it's often a lot more authentic when you do it. Like even just having a student talk to a phone and do a little testimonial is actually a lot more effective than having a professional photographer do that video for that person. There's a number of other reasons why. It's much easier to ask 10 people to do one, and a good couple of those would actually do it. Whereas if you have like a professional get involved, it increases the cost and it increases the stress, because now that person feels like they need to have everything perfect. If you're doing it with you need logistics comes in, and then suddenly this thing has become quite a big thing. And actually, when you think about Facebook as well, people, I know myself, you're scrolling through anything that looks too perfect, too stock photo, but you will stop at something that looks like it could have been one of your friends. It could have been one of your friends' daughters or sons or whatever. It's something that feels real. So that would be my take on that. There will be occasions where you might want to do like a professional image. Maybe the hero shot of your website would probably be one of those that you don't want a really fuzzy shot, but certainly ads and that kind of thing, I would be using just whatever's on your phone or whatever they can do on their phone. Ludo, keep shouting away if you notice something. Otherwise, I'm sort of just going through.
Don't worry, guys. Please do keep submitting your questions there. We'll try and get through as many as we can, and I'm sure Alex will be able to take the discussion a little bit further based off of those questions. But maybe from photos, we could move a little bit towards something that Cassie has brought up, which is customer reviews. Alex, how do we go about integrating customer reviews into our marketing strategy?
So when you say, can you just clarify what a customer review might be?
So, for example, feedback from a client. Feedback.
Okay, like a testimonial. Do you mean?
A testimonial, yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, testimonials are great for the website for a start, but also for ads. They're really, really great, particularly if they're in video format, like just short 20, 30 seconds work fantastic when you're advertising. One of the reasons that they're so powerful is it's ideally it's your target market, right? So if it's, let's just say that you're tutoring new arrivals that have come from the Middle East, you know, having somebody that's maybe even speaking in Arabic and telling like, hey, how fantastic this experience was with the tutor could be a great way of A, differentiating yourself, B, talking in the native language of the person that might be buying. And you can use subtitles in English as well, or vice versa, if you wish, to be able to make that really relevant. And actually, there was a question before just on like, hey, are you advertising? If you are looking at advertising to somebody that their first language isn't English, then yeah, I think advertising in that person's language makes total sense. Again, it differentiates you and it gives you an advantage because the big box tutoring companies are not going to be doing that. And you can really tell your story.
Yeah, and what about the communication strategy for asking for testimonials? You mentioned a little bit earlier about picking the right moment to request these things. Can you dive into that a little bit further? When's a good time, both during the week, but also in your relationship with a parent or student? When's a good time to ask for a testimonial?
I think a lot of people will know that their relationship with their customers goes a bit like a roller coaster. Hopefully that's just like up and then plateaus and then up. But often, either way, you don't want to be asking a plateau state or in a low state. You're wanting to hit those peaks, and usually those happen after a bit of a breakthrough. So with LearnCube, we notice that when a customer like maybe sort of a month or two in, and then they have a really fantastic experience and they're like, oh, this whole thing that I had to do, I don't have to do anymore. I used to have to share links and now I don't. And so that's a moment where I would, for example, ask, and in a tutor's experience, it might be they had a really big breakthrough with their student on a math problem. And it was and the kid communicated to the parents over the moon. Like that's the perfect moment to ask that. So you need to have this in your back pocket waiting for that opportunity to ask, because then they're in their prime moment to ask. The thing you could also do is soften the ask as well by saying, hey, look, I really loved this experience too. I was wondering if you could do me a really big favor. And again, if you've built personal connection with somebody, they're looking for a chance to help you. If you're an independent, it's really easy to draw on this. And if you're a tutoring agency, I would really encourage your tutors to look for opportunities for referrals and provide a referral bonus for the tutors that are able to do that well. And you can provide some really clear guidelines on what you want that testimonial to look like and what the kind of process is like. Hey, I need permission. I would start with verbal permission first. Like I would go through all of the process of getting that testimonial done before you go through anything super formal. Like you will need to go through something super formal, but you don't want to get the formalities stop the process of actually getting the testimonial. So particularly if you're asking for somebody to sign something, don't get somebody to sign for that before they've done the testimonial. I would do that as like, hey, you've done the testimonial. I just wanted to make sure that you're okay with us using this in these ways, because you've already done the hard work and then they feel like, oh, go on. Whereas I think if you're kind of creating like a barrier for somebody to do a great testimonial, then that's just gonna create a lot of friction, and then they'll probably like, oh yeah, I'll do it next week. It's now a chore, no longer a favor.
We all get that.
Yeah. Actually, one thing I would also add is try and do it. You can do it in one. I would do it with them there potentially, or like straight after a session, because then it's not another task that they have to schedule. So if they're doing it with their phones, you could still, like, particularly if you're doing it online, right? You could just be there supporting them. They could be doing it to their, you could even ask them questions, and they could be, have their phone in front of them and do that testimonial for you then and there. If you're going to do it if you're doing online tutoring like this and you're just wanting to grab a screen share, you could just, as I say, do that right then and there with them. But I think it's really important that you don't let the opportunity escape. Otherwise, it becomes a chore, not a favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you've been saying just there, Alex, will really tie in very well with what Michael Gibbon will be saying in around 15-20 minutes time, because he's going to be providing some templates, checklists for testimonials and for thank you notes and for catching up with parents and students. So these two sessions are going to really go hand in hand, and that is in no small part down to what you've been saying so far, Alex. So thank you very much. There were a few more questions here.
I'm noticing this, yeah. So I'm just gonna, if you notice anything, let me know, but otherwise I'm just sort of going from top to bottom.
Yeah.
One of the other things I really think is going to be powerful, I heard a lot from a previous session about tutors. It shouldn't just be about students doing testimonials. You really want, if you're running an agency, you really want tutors doing the same testimonials. So don't let that opportunity escape you. And also you're training your tutors on how to do maybe testimonials with their students as well. I think you're much more likely to have a tutor get a favor to do a testimonial than possibly, particularly if you're a larger organization and there's too much distance between yourself as an organization and a customer. You're probably going to need your tutors to be your vanguard of testimonials.
Brilliant. I think Danielle had a question there about shorter videos for Instagram stories or for that kind of marketing and not looking professional enough. Now, I know, Alex, your specific niche is not video editing and creating kind of online Instagram video editing, but in the work that you've done in LearnCube create incredible marketing videos. Moving from photos to videos a little bit, are there any tips you have there for creating videos that capture a tutor or a tutoring company's story? How did you capture LearnCube's story in your videos?
Yeah, so in our videos, fortunately, we've got a really fun, dynamic person that's leading. Those are not actually myself, but we've got a great character, great moustache, and everyone loves him, Willem. He's our head of education. Actually, he's talking later this week. So, but one of the things that is there's no real secret to it. Anybody can do video editing, particularly now. I just use iMovie if I'm doing my own videos, but you don't need something super professional to be able to do the video edits. When you're talking about Instagram and those sorts of media, you may, depending on what they say, you may even just want that video to be without like voice, without somebody speaking. You might want it to have video on top, and it might just be capturing all of the emotion, but without any of the kind of somebody speaking. Speaking can sometimes not always come across as interesting. So if it's a boring speaker, then it's probably better just to put music over it, but you can still see the emotion and the genuineness that somebody might feel when you use it, and use editing that way. By the way, I probably don't have quite enough experience in Instagram, so I don't know if I'll be able to answer too much on that really well. Facebook is something I probably know a little bit more about, but did want to mention that.
Yeah, although it would seem that with the rise of LinkedIn stories and Facebook Messenger stories, that they're all kind of homogenizing a little bit, aren't they? So
they are. I think some of them you may need to look at the format. Like some will work a lot better with a square versus like a horizontal image. So again, like with LearnCube, sometimes we have a bit of a problem because a lot of our videos, are the size of a screen, but those are rectangular rather than a square shape. So it's certainly something to be aware of when somebody even is doing a testimonial. There's some formats that you may want to have that in.
Well, maybe we're not too far away from kind of Instagram friendly sized online tutoring platforms.
That's right. That's right.
Instagram stories, yeah.
Exactly. Let me have a look.
So yeah, we've got about five or so minutes left. So please do pop any more questions in there. There's the slides that Alex has been taking us through will be available in the Festival Hub afterwards. So all of those wonderful models that that Alex has been taking us through will be available to you. And there's a whole section within the Festival Hub just for how to get in touch with Alex.
Absolutely. I was just wondering if anyone had any questions around choosing niches and how they feel about that. Like particularly, I know that a lot of particularly medium to larger tutoring agencies that have not done any online tutoring and now getting into online tutoring, sometimes they really struggle because they had effectively quite a large business pre-COVID, and they may still do so, but they've really had to switch a lot more to that into online, and that means that they may feel more exposure to competition that they may not have faced before. Maybe before they were really focused on a specific geographic area, and now they feel like there is more competition in general. So one of the things I would really encourage people to do is still try and find an angle. Your angle is going to need to fit the size of your company. So if you're an independent tutor, you can make that so niche and so specific because you only need 10 to 20 people that are going to fit that particular profile. And then you're going after your dream customers as well. And I think that's important as well. Sometimes I see tutoring agencies go, I think everyone's great. I have great experiences with all these. I love the diversity, and that's helpful on one degree, but it's really not helpful for your marketing. So no matter how broad you think your target market is, your marketing can only speak to one audience at a time. You can get more and more sophisticated at targeting different audiences with different ads and having different sequences, but it really starts with getting one right and then building up from there. One of the other things I think is important as well is, just like we've talked about testimonials, is on referrals. So I think that should be a major part of your strategy, is not just hoping that referrals happen, but really orchestrate those moments. So just in the same way that you've got somebody that's done a testimonial, you should also be looking at asking somebody to do a referral. You might, if you've got an agency, you might also need to incentivize tutors to think ahead and look for those moments in order to ask for referrals. But I think that's a really important thing that you should have as part of your timeline. In fact, one of the things that we didn't talk quite as much about, I almost forgot, but we were talking about these moments where you can add experience and add a bit more personalization. So that's that kind of after they've done a session or after they've been with you for a bit. But that's a moment that you should have a total system for. You're like, I look for these trigger points, and when this happens, I know what I'm going to send them. I know how they're going to be able to refer and make that a really easy process. So it might be like, send them this link, and then I'll know that you've referred them. Just use my name in the subject line, like in the email itself. I mean, you can just use really simple ways to make sure that people feel like they're going to be rewarded and those referrals attract. But make sure that there's a process there, because it's, if we talk about word of mouth as the most powerful medium, that's brilliant. But what if you can orchestrate that so word of mouth actually happens rather than it being serendipity when that actually happens? Now, would I offer a reward for referrals? I think so, yeah. I mean, again, some of the metrics that you should know is like, what's the lifetime value of each student customer? So when you're starting out, it's hard to know because you don't have quite as much information, but you should know, hey, most of my students stay with me this amount of time and they do this amount of sessions, which is this total lifetime value, and then you know what your profit level is. As long as that's big enough, you should be really willing to give a lot to be able to get that student. And when somebody does a referral, that means you haven't had to spend money on advertising. that person's already pumped and already set up with the right expectations and ready to succeed. So yeah, you can't beat a referral, and orchestrating one, you know, you'll be leaving money on the table if you don't.
There we go. Perfect. That's a brilliant way to end that conversation. And Danielle, you summed it up brilliantly there. You said that it was one of the best sessions you've had, and you left with multiple pages of notes. I hope others of you have as well. So, Alex, thank you very, very much.
Totally.
What we're going to be doing?
Hold on. We've got a gift for Alex. We've got an answer garden for you. You're going to love this. Have you got the link? All right.
This answer garden.
You're going to love this answer garden. Okay, so inspired by Danielle's chat, Ludo and I have just decided to do an answer garden where you are going to say what you have gained from this session. There's no limit to how much you're going to put in there. What's going to be interesting is to see what the common themes are. Ludo, is it ready?
It's right there. So.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
You click on that link in there, everyone, and it will take you to an answer garden, that's the title of which is what was your key takeaway from Alex's session? Alex, you can put your answers into this as well if you want. So as you enter your answers in there, I will be refreshing this page and they will be popping up onto the screen. Remember that the screen you're currently seeing is my shared screen. So you just need to click the link in the Zoom chat. So here we go. We've got a few coming through here.
Fantastic. Hey, these are all my points. You guys have been listening. Oh my gosh. Fantastic.
That is the best gift for a teacher, Alex. We just made your learning visible.
You totally did. I'm loving it. Thank you so much for listening, all of you. And definitely get in touch with LearnCube, any of my team and myself. It's been a total pleasure talking with you today.
Yeah, it's been fabulous.
Look at those things coming up. It seems that the best thing about this is we're not even getting multiple answers.
Yeah.
Coming up even bigger, but there's such a broad spread that you've been kind of explaining to us, Alex. So thank you very much.
No worries. One thing I would want to.
Oh, look at that!
Hey, one thing I would want to suggest people do is also we've got a podcast called Get More Students. It's for tutoring companies and for tutors just like yourselves. So if you want something a bit more specific, I do this with a friend of mine, Herbert Goetzer, and we really go into detail into specific marketing areas that relate to tutoring. So it's the Get More Students podcast, and would love to continue contributing back to the to the tutoring sector. So thanks so much, and thanks Julia and Ludo for putting on such an amazing event.
Thanks for being part of it from the very start, Alex. It means so much to us.
Absolutely.
And you're going to see me posting that survey in the group chat several times. Please do click on that and complete that when you can. We'd love to understand more about the tutoring landscape. So we're going to say for one final time, thank you very much, Alex. And you will see Alex again on the Friday and also in the Tutors Marketplace from time to time on each of the days.
Absolutely. I'll be in later on today as well if you want to catch up.
Excellent.